Ethan and Claire, a young couple with hearts full of hope, finally achieved their dream of owning a home. They found what seemed like the perfect place, an old Victorian manor on the edge of a sleepy town. The house, hidden amongst ancient trees and shrouded in an ever-present fog, called to them. For a price that seemed too good to be true, the keys were theirs. The real estate agent, his face etched with a mixture of relief and anxiety, practically threw the keys into Ethan's hand. Claire, ever the optimist, saw only potential in the dusty rooms and faded grandeur. "It just needs some love," she declared, her eyes sparkling as she traced her fingers along the worn banister. Ethan, while sharing her excitement, couldn't shake off a feeling of unease. The house felt heavy, the air thick with an unseen presence. The faint scratches on the walls and the floorboards that groaned under their weight whispered unsettling stories. Still, Claire's enthusiasm was infectious. She saw their future in every room, a future filled with laughter, love, and the joy of making this house their own. Morning painted the sky with hues of optimism, a stark contrast to the growing unease within the old Victorian house. Claire, armed with a scraper and a bucket of soapy water, began her assault on the outdated floral wallpaper in the living room. She envisioned a bright, airy space, a canvas for their dreams. But the house had other plans. Hours of back-breaking work yielded little result. The wallpaper clung to the walls with an almost unnatural tenacity. Each strip Claire managed to peel away seemed to reappear overnight, the intricate floral patterns mocking her efforts. "It's like it doesn't want to change," she muttered, running a hand over the stubborn paper. Despite the setbacks, Claire remained undeterred. As days turned into nights, the strange occurrences escalated. Furniture rearranged itself overnight. Ethan and Claire would meticulously arrange the living room, only to wake up to a scene of unsettling chaos. Chairs faced the fireplace, as if awaiting unseen guests. Books toppled from shelves, their pages filled with cryptic symbols. "This isn't right," Ethan muttered one morning, staring at a fallen portrait that now lay shattered on the floor. Claire tried to rationalize the events, blaming drafts or their own forgetfulness. Sleep offered little respite from the growing sense of dread that permeated the house. Ethan tossed and turned, plagued by nightmares of shadowy figures and unseen eyes watching him from the darkness. Claire, too, was haunted by a feeling of being watched, her dreams filled with whispers and cold, clammy hands reaching out to her from the shadows. One night, as they lay in bed, the silence of the house was shattered by the unmistakable sound of a woman sobbing. Ethan, his heart pounding in his chest, grabbed his flashlight and cautiously made his way towards the sound. But each room he checked was empty, the sound receding just as he thought he'd pinpointed its source. He returned to Claire, his face pale and drawn, only to find her equally shaken. The kitchen, usually a place of warmth and nourishment, had become another source of unease in the house. The floor, uneven and creaky, felt spongy in places, as if weakened by unseen decay. One afternoon, while Claire was out trying to find wallpaper that wouldn't fight back, Ethan decided to tackle the kitchen floor. Armed with a crowbar, he began prying up the old warped floorboards. Beneath the surface, the wood was rotten and damp, years of neglect evident in its crumbling texture. But it was what Ethan saw next that made his blood run cold. Burned into the subfloor, blackened and preserved by time, was a handprint. This handprint had been seared into the wood, a mark of unimaginable pain and terror. Ethan's breath caught in his throat. Claire found Ethan in the kitchen, his face ashen, his eyes fixated on something beneath the floorboards. She knelt beside him, her own breath catching in her throat as she saw the blackened handprint. Together, they carefully removed more floorboards, unearthing a collection of charred objects. Fragments of letters, the ink burned away, leaving behind ghostly impressions of words that spoke of love, loss, and a desperate plea for help. A melted silver locket, its delicate design twisted and fused by intense heat. And a rusted key, its shape strangely ornate, as if it once unlocked something more than just a door. The house, it seemed, was ready to reveal its secrets, but at a terrible cost. Each object they unearthed whispered of a past shrouded in tragedy and pain. The crash echoed through the house like a clap of thunder, shaking the very foundation of their sanity. Ethan and Claire, their hearts pounding in unison, slowly made their way upstairs, each step heavy with trepidation. They checked every room, every closet, every shadowy corner, but found nothing to explain the noise. The house was silent now, but it was a silence that screamed. A silence pregnant with unseen menace, as if the very walls were holding their breath, waiting for the right moment to exhale a torrent of terror. Ethan and Claire could feel their nerves fraying, their grip on reality loosening with each passing moment. The house had awakened. The house was never truly silent, even in the dead of night. Strange creaks and groans echoed through the empty halls, each sound a hammer blow to Ethan and Claire's dwindling sense of peace. But that night, something else stirred. Claire's sleep, troubled and fitful, was invaded by vivid, terrifying dreams. She dreamt of fire, a raging inferno that consumed everything in its path. She saw shadowy figures dancing amidst the flames, their faces contorted in agony, their screams swallowed by the roar of the blaze. One figure stood out, a woman wreathed in flames, her outstretched hand a plea for help that Claire couldn't answer. She woke with a gasp, her heart racing, her body slick with cold sweat. Driven by a desperate need for answers, Ethan and Claire sought out the town's oldest resident, a librarian named Mrs. Hawthorne, who possessed an encyclopedic knowledge of the town's history. Her eyes, sharp as a hawk's, seemed to pierce through them as they recounted the strange occurrences in the house. The old Victorian manor on Harbinger Lane, Mrs. Hawthorne's voice, raspy with age, sent shivers down their spines. Many have tried to make it a home, but none have stayed for long. It's a place of sorrow, that house, a place where the past refuses to die. She led them to a dusty corner of the library where ancient books whispered forgotten tales. With trembling hands, she opened a leather-bound volume, its pages filled with faded newspaper clippings and handwritten accounts of the house's dark history. 5 families had lived within its walls, each one meeting a tragic end. As they read the accounts of the house's tragic past, a chilling realization washed over Ethan and Claire. The strange occurrences, the unsettling noises, the burned handprint under the floorboards, it all pointed to something sinister, something malevolent, lurking beneath the surface of their dream home. Each tragedy seemed to build upon the last, creating a tapestry of despair that permeated every inch of the house. The air grew thick with the weight of unspoken words, of fear and suffering that had seeped into the very walls. "We have to leave," Claire whispered, her voice trembling with a mixture of fear and determination. Ethan nodded, his throat tight with a fear he couldn't articulate. That night, the house made its choice. As they packed their belongings, desperate to escape the suffocating grip of their dream-turned nightmare, a strange stillness descended upon the house. The silence was shattered by the unmistakable crackle of flames. Ethan raced downstairs, his heart pounding in his chest, only to be met by a scene of terrifying beauty. Flames, bright and hungry, danced across the walls, licking at the wallpaper, consuming everything in their path. But there was something wrong, something unnatural about the fire. The house wasn't being destroyed, it was being rebuilt. The house was not just burning, it was remembering. Ethan and Claire stood paralyzed, their blood turning to ice as they witnessed the horrifying spectacle. The flames, now a raging inferno, seemed to dance with spectral figures. The faces of the damned stared back at them, their hollow eyes burning with a cold, malevolent light. "It's them!" Claire choked out, her voice barely a whisper. The families from the stories. Each ghostly figure bore a chilling resemblance to the descriptions in the old librarian's book. Ethan grabbed Claire's hand, urging her toward the front door. "We have to get out of here," he shouted, his words nearly drowned out by the roar of the fire. Panic surged through them, a primal instinct to escape the suffocating heat and the terrifying presence that surrounded them. Ethan lunged for the front door, throwing his weight against it, but it wouldn't budge. The old oak felt as solid as steel, the doorknob searing his hand with an unnatural heat. "It's locked!" Claire cried, her voice shrill with terror. "We're trapped!" She rattled the handle, but it was no use. The house had sealed its fate, trapping them within its fiery embrace. They were now prisoners in a tomb of their own choosing, condemned to share the fate of those who had come before. Ethan scanned the room, desperation clawing at his throat. The windows were nailed shut, painted over with layer upon layer of old paint, sealing off any chance of escape. The heat intensified, the flames licking at the ceiling, casting grotesque shadows that danced with the ghostly figures still swirling within the inferno. He could feel the heat scorching his skin, smell the singed hair, and the acrid taste of smoke filling his lungs. The house, it seemed, was not content with simply burning. It was savoring their terror, drawing strength from their despair. The flames pressed closer, their fiery tongues licking at the edges of their vision, and Ethan knew that time was running out. A surge of adrenaline, fueled by a primal instinct to survive, coursed through Ethan's veins. If the house wanted to play with fire, he would give it fire. "The kitchen!" he yelled, grabbing Claire's hand. "There's a gas line under the sink." He struck a match, the tiny flame a beacon of defiance, their only hope of escaping the clutches of the house that had become their living hell. With a swift, desperate motion, Ethan ignited the lighter. A jet of flame erupted from the exposed gas line. The kitchen transformed into a raging furnace. The house fought back with a vengeance. Flames twisted and contorted, hurting them back. The front door swung open, beckoning them into the Inferno. Instinct took over. Ethan grabbed Claire's hand, pulling her towards the open doorway and into the relative coolness of the night. They didn't look back, didn't dare to breathe, as they ran through the Inferno. The heat scorching their backs, the screams of the damned echoing in their ears. They emerged into the night air, gasping for breath, their lungs raw, their bodies trembling with exhaustion and terror. The cool night air never felt so good, the taste of freedom never so sweet. They stumbled away from the burning house, collapsing onto the dew-soaked grass, their bodies racked with coughs, their eyes stinging from the smoke. But even as they lay there, struggling to catch their breath, a new horror unfolded before their eyes. The house, still engulfed in flames, was not collapsing, not succumbing to the inferno that raged within. It was rebuilding itself. The flames, as if guided by an unseen hand, began to recede, the ghostly figures within the inferno fading back into the shadows. Charred timbers reformed, blackened walls regained their shape, and the gaping hole where the front door had stood sealed shut, as if the fire had never been. The house, wounded but defiant, stood tall against the backdrop of the night, its windows glowing with an eerie internal light. Ethan and Claire watched in stunned silence as the house, their dream-turned nightmare, reasserted its dominance over the land. The flames, now reduced to flickering embers, danced across its surface, casting grotesque shadows. The first light of dawn painted the sky with hues of pink and orange, a stark contrast to the darkness that still clung to the house. Ethan and Claire, battered and bruised, could only stare at the house that had refused to let them go. The house remained, a silent sentinel on the edge of town, waiting patiently for its next victims. The sun, a pale disk in the morning sky, did little to warm the chill that had settled deep within Ethan and Claire. They walked in silence, their footsteps heavy on the asphalt, each step taking them further from the nightmare of Harbinger Lane. The physical wounds would heal, but the scars left by the house ran deeper. Ethan glanced at Claire, her face pale, her eyes distant, and he saw a reflection of his own terror. They had escaped, but a part of them, the precious innocence, had been consumed by the flames. News of the fire spread through the small town like wildfire. Whispers followed Ethan and Claire as they made their way to the bus station. Ethan and Claire, their heads bowed, paid them no heed. The for sale sign on Harbinger Lane disappeared, replaced by a sold sign. A new family, oblivious to the horrors, would soon cross the threshold. Ethan and Claire boarded the bus, their destination unknown. As the bus pulled away, they stole one last glance at the house. They swore they saw a flicker of movement in the upstairs window.
Thanks for joining us in the shadows tonight. If you enjoyed the terror, like and subscribe for more spine-chilling stories. Share your thoughts below. And remember, stay close to the light. Until next time, sleep tight if you can.